Welcome Brad Keywell to our platform tonight. And first off, we'd really like to thank the William G. McGowan Charitable Fund for sponsoring tonight's lecture. Tonight's program is on the record, and you may tweet. The Twitter handles are on your biography, but please make sure your phones are on silent so they don't disrupt the program. A few upcoming programs to mention. Next Monday night, we will welcome the Nature Conservancy CEO, Mark Tursick, who will be in conversation with the CEO of Method Products, Adam Lowry, talking about nature's fortune. We'll also welcome David Rothkopf, who will be talking about his new book, National Insecurity. On November 19th, we'll have a special panel on Ebola, the anatomy of a global outbreak. We've got a terrific panel with 4 experts in different aspects of pandemics and global health that will be talking about it. And on December 2nd, we'll welcome Walter Isaacson, who will talk about his new book, The Innovators. I'll be back up to moderate the Q&A, but in the meantime, if you would help me welcome to the stage the former U.S. Ambassador to the Netherlands and a board member of the Chicago Council on Global Affairs, Ambassador Faye Hartog-Levin.
Thank you, Niamh. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. As Niamh mentioned, this evening's lecture is generously supported by the William G. McGowan Charitable Fund. As you may be aware, the McGowan Fund supports a fellowship program which provides grants to second-year MBA students who show outstanding leadership potential and strong dedication to ethics and public services. We have with us tonight a number of current and former McGowan Fellows, and I'd like to ask them to stand up to be recognized. Thank you. The centerpiece of the fellowship is an annual symposium on business leadership and ethics, which this year is hosted by the University of Chicago Booth School of Business, and for which this public lecture is serving as a kickoff. The McGowan Fellows are a highly diverse group with interests ranging from education reform to finance and energy, interests that are shared by many members of the Chicago Council. So it's with great enthusiasm that we embarked on a partnership to host this event when approached by the fund to do so earlier this year. To identify a speaker for this lecture, we sought a business leader who, through his or her professional experiences, could inspire the next generation of leaders. We sought someone who had overcome obstacles and who had vision to create change both locally and globally. In short, we wanted an entrepreneur. It turns out that we did not have to look far to find someone who worked hard to foster a culture of innovation right here in Chicago, nor could we think of a more qualified and inspiring individual to speak to us tonight than Brad Keywell. This evening's lecture is also in memory of Sue Gin McGowan, who passed away in September. Sue was an entrepreneur dedicated to cultivating young leaders. Sue Gin McGowan served as president of the McGowan Board since its inception, and her leadership and vision guided the fund toward excellence and accomplishment. We are pleased that the directors of the McGowan Fund are with us here tonight, including Mary Alice Gin, Sue's sister-in-law, and Sherilyn Kingsbury, Sue's niece. And we extend a special thanks to Diana Spencer, Executive Director of the Fund, with whom it has been a pleasure to work to present this program. Sue Gin was a good friend of mine for almost 20 years. She had a hard-driving exterior with a heart as soft as her exterior was tough. She was impatient with and intolerant of those who either didn't care or didn't try to make the world better for others. She loved her business successes for the challenge of winning and also for the example she could be to the next generation of what you can achieve if you believe and work hard. Sue believed that all things were possible. Sue was humble and modest, and the only time I can ever remember her bragging to me about her success when she was recognized as one of the top companies in the country who saved jobs during the recession. That was an achievement of which she was very proud. Sue took business risks and accepted the consequences, both positive and negative, and she got great satisfaction from giving back to the philanthropies in which she was involved, both on her behalf and on behalf of the McGowan Fund. So it is with great pleasure tonight that we host this program on leadership with an optimistic and entrepreneurial look towards the future in business and in memory of Sue Gin McGowan. We're very fortunate to have a great visionary such as Brad Keywell with us tonight, and I look forward to his perspectives. Let me briefly introduce him to you. Brad Keywell is a co-founder and managing partner at Lightbank, a venture capital firm that specializes in investments in disruptive technology companies, a co-founder and director of Groupon and Echo Global Logistics, the founder of Chicago Ideas Week, and he finds time to be an adjunct professor at the University of Chicago Booth School of Business. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Brad Keywell.
Thank you very much. Good evening. Thank you for that very kind introduction, Ambassador. And I share your sentiments about Sue, and I'm honored to be giving this talk tonight in her memory. So, the Chicago Council is an organization that means very much to me. I've been involved in events and participating for a while, but my wife is on the board, so it makes it even more meaningful. And beyond that, there's an intellectual bond that I find with the council. I did start Chicago Ideas Week, and Ideas Week and Chicago Ideas as an organization is really about connecting thinkers and being inspired by ideas, and also bringing people together around intellectual discourse, which is part of what makes the council so special as well. So thank you for having me. So when we talked about me perhaps giving this talk, entrepreneurship absolutely was what I'm most passionate about. But beyond that, as we discussed what the sort of subtopics might be, three words came to my mind: vision, failure, and disruption. And I sort of equate those three things. I'll put it in a botanic analogy. You know, vision to me is watering the soil. It's preparing the ground. It's the first idea of how something might become. Failure is the struggle of that seed to take all the resources that it's been given and find its way to the surface. And disruption is what happens when the flower starts to bloom. Something beautiful has been presented to the world, and now what do we make of it? The issue, I think, as we talk about entrepreneurship and those three concepts, is that vision is often misunderstood or ignored or put down. Failure is feared way too much. Failure is a reality that I think our culture has not embraced the way that it can and should. And disruption is the goal. And a lot of people are uncomfortable with that concept of disruption being the goal, but it's a very valuable goal. Now, before I sort of dig into these three concepts in some detail, I thought I'd share what I think is just a great story, a great entrepreneurship story, a great startup story. So there's a huge company, multinational, and operations all over the world. Everybody, you know this company, and there was a small group of entrepreneurs that worked for this company. And it's funny because this huge company started out entrepreneurial. I mean, the roots of this company were disruptive, and they were innovative, and they were, entrepreneurship defined. But as this company grew bigger and bigger and bigger, it grew disconnected from the people that were at this point part of it. And the company was old enough that the people that were running it really had no clear clue about what it was like when the company started. So the vision of this company had been sort of diluted over time. And what's also interesting is that the employees on a mass scale of this company didn't really like it that much. I mean, they worked there, but they didn't really like it that much. And the customers of the company lost that connection, that soulful identification with what the company really means. And so this small group had a totally disruptive idea. Now, I would also add that they, when they started, they were young. So, and entrepreneurship is by no means about age, but I think when you're young and have entrepreneurial vision and entrepreneurial passion, it can be challenging. And the reason it's challenging is because people around you might have real doubts. They might doubt that you have the ability to pull off this bold, audacious vision. And this group in particular did not get a lot of support from their family or friends. And in fact, what's interesting is that when they first started to raise money, far from it not being easy, okay, it was extraordinarily hard. And some of their early efforts to, PR efforts and advertising efforts didn't make it any easier. They made some mistakes. They failed early. But what's so important about these entrepreneurs, in my opinion, is that persistence, is that despite really staggering odds against their success, they kept going. Now, their hard work resulted in some luck, and I think that a consistency in true entrepreneurs is these strokes of luck, but it's rare that a stroke of luck is not a result of really, really hard work. And in this case, their luck was they found a mentor, which is also not uncommon for successful entrepreneurs. At some point, you're going to, and you hope that you find a mentor, and you hope you're prepared to accept what the mentor can offer you and develop a relationship where there's real give and take and real meaning to both sides of that equation. And so this group of entrepreneurs found a mentor who was critical in two ways. The first is this mentor opened up relationships that these entrepreneurs would never have without this help of a really well-connected, more established mentor. They also were introduced to sources of capital, which is critical to entrepreneurial success. It's the oxygen of entrepreneurship. And so they were introduced to capital by this mentor. And you know what? The mentor got a lot in return. The mentor wanted to be connected to this disruptive idea. And in fact, what happened is their new venture, their startup worked, and it grew. So if you don't know the business I'm talking about, it's the United States of America. And the entrepreneurs were our founding fathers. The mentor was Benjamin Franklin. And the point is, we are in the most entrepreneurial, most unique, most special country in the world that's ever been created to foster entrepreneurship, because this country was made through entrepreneurship. They might not have even understood what entrepreneurship was at the time. In fact, the term entrepreneurship was first sort of popularly used by a guy named a French economist named Jean-Baptiste Say in the early 1800s. So the reason I tell you that story, in addition, is that we're in a time, I think, in our nation's history when entrepreneurship is both understood more than ever, but underappreciated at a level that I think is important to recognize. You see, in the last 25 years in our country, nearly 100% of the net new jobs that have been created by companies that are 5 years old or less. So think about that. Companies that are beyond 5 years old tend to hire and then fire, and then hire and then fire. We depend on startups to create new opportunities and new growth. Yet at the same time, it's concerning, to me at least, that for the first time in many decades, in the last 2 years, new company creation was lower than company exits, than company destruction. So for decades and decades, on a consistent basis, the companies that were created were more than the companies that were destroyed. That changed recently. And why? Is it the political climate? Is it an aversion to risk? I don't know. But I do think there are telling signs when you dig into some of the themes that I'm going to talk about tonight that are worth thinking about when we ask ourselves, how can we ensure that this entrepreneurial dream continues and that the climate of our country is uniquely accepting to the importance of entrepreneurship. I think it's also worth noting that the Midwest has the lowest entrepreneurship rate in America. So our region, in terms of new company creation, is at the bottom. And I'll touch a little bit about why. So we'll start with vision. Back to the three themes of vision, failure, and disruption. The easiest way that I try to sort of articulate the vision of an entrepreneur is to equate it, to parallel it with the vision of an artist. So artists are individuals who deep inside have passion, they have love for creativity, for expression. They need to express themselves. The likelihood that an artist can make a living, can earn enough money to live from their art is extraordinarily low. I'd venture to say it's much lower than the likelihood that somebody who starts a business can earn enough money in the business to live, but we'll get into that in a second. The likelihood that an artist can earn enough money as an artist to live is very low. Yet the number of artists that are in our midst is extraordinary. And often you see an artist work all day long on their art and then go wait tables or do odd jobs just to put food on their table so they can go back to doing their art. Now, that would seem in a capitalist society irrational. But the rationality is that they've got a vision deep inside about their creative expression. And they have a need despite all more rational thinking to express it, whether it's through paint and canvas, whether it's through sculpture, whether it's through movies or otherwise. Artists are artists, and you really can't take the artist out of an artist. I find a similar theme around entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurs have a deep vision, and that vision is often totally misunderstood by those around them. The vision of an entrepreneur, unfortunately, is often met in family and friends with doubt, with skepticism, or with total obliviousness. Yet entrepreneurs keep going. The likelihood that an entrepreneur who starts a business will succeed is less than 30% in this country. Less than 30%. Yet we keep trying. Entrepreneurs keep trying. Now, why would that happen? So clearly, for artists, the capitalist opportunities are easy to understand how poor they are, yet the artist keeps creating. For an entrepreneur, the vision is the driver, and the attempts and the following through of that opportunity, of that inner voice, continues. The reason is because there is no other choice. Sometimes people think about entrepreneurship and they say, well, why don't you get a job? Why would you work this hard when the upside possibility is X, Y, or Z? Just get a job. And I think if you dig down to the psyche of most entrepreneurs, the answer is, that's not even a possibility. Not even a possibility. Now, the risk, I think, as a community, is that we hear visions of entrepreneurs and we put them down. We don't accept them as what they are right now, which are visions. It's easy for those on the receiving end of a vision, of an entrepreneurial idea, to instantly play out the whole game and explain why it'll never work. Because the framework that we all live in is our framework, number one, and it's the today framework. It's the right now framework. And we hear an idea, and through that computer processing of ours in our brains, we instantly feed it through and we say, it'll never work. Never work. But it goes without saying that thank goodness those who have those visions move past that reaction that they get from so many. For me, vision, I got so many stories where vision that I may have had at the time might not have even made logical sense to me, but in my heart, it made perfect sense. And that vision was the driver, and the no's and the, was all over the place. I went to law school. I went to law school because my two mentors, my father and Sam Zell, who had become a mentor and friend when I was in college, both in essence said, you really need to go to law school. You got into Michigan Law School, you just got to go. And my response was, I guess I agree, but I practice law, period. I literally entered law school on day one saying it's an impossibility that I'll practice law. And I say with a demented pride that when I graduated, there were 2 people out of 500 plus graduates at Michigan Law School that year who did not go into law, me and Eric Lefkowski, my business partner. But the conversations of me sitting down at my kitchen table, I can so vividly remember it, and explaining to my father that in fact I really was not going to go into law, and I really was not going to accept an opportunity to work for Sam Zell, but in fact I was going with Eric to buy and start businesses. That's the vision I'm talking about, and my hope when I meet entrepreneurs is always that there are people in their lives that are accepting of these crazy visions, because those are, every entrepreneur deserves somebody to validate what might not be obvious. And there's a more recent example. We had an idea for an approach to the transportation and logistics industry. Now, this is 5% of the world GDP is spent on transportation and logistics. And our idea back in 2005 was basically that technology and data could uniquely disrupt this industry. It could make the industry more efficient because, in fact, this is an industry where the supply and demand curve is highly elastic. It's moving all the time. So with better data, we could harness opportunities, find arbitrage, and build a business. The best people in this industry who I talked to told me it was totally impossible and I shouldn't waste my time. The good news is that there's a deep vision, and we ended up starting a company called Echo Global Logistics, which this year will do over $1 billion in revenue, which we took public on NASDAQ 5 years ago, and which in the 8 years since we started it is the fastest growing logistics and freight company on the planet. That's because we followed vision, and we could have easily listened to lots of people who said, you shouldn't do it. The next thing I want to talk about is failure. It's a concept that's near and dear to my heart. Number one, because I fail a lot. Number two, that I grew up knowing lots of people who really feared failure and observing people whose fear of failure was a guiding light in their lives. And I decided, without probably even saying it or thinking it, that I did not want to be that kind of person. Failure is inevitable. We fail all the time. We all do. We fail every day. But the construct of how you think about failure, I think, is partly what separates an artist or an entrepreneur from others in our society. Entrepreneurs uniquely seek out failure. As I said, the likelihood of failing is over 70% when you start something new. It's the 30%. It's the 30% that an entrepreneur can control that they seek out. And the importance of failure being simply part of the journey and not, the death knell of all entrepreneurship is critical in our society. So let's go back to the story about the founding of the United States of America. We all got lucky. And the luck is that somebody way back when decided that they should create something called bankruptcy. Bankruptcy in America is an extraordinarily unique concept on the global stage. Bankruptcy allows entrepreneurs to start something, have it not work through honest, hard effort, have it fail, and try again. Compare this with other countries these days and how they treat entrepreneurship and how they treat failure. In England, you're on the sidelines for a year before you can start again. In Spain, creditors are allowed to pursue you anywhere you are, and they often harass you when you're out in public, when you're eating. They go after you all the time. In Germany, 6 years on the sidelines. In France, 9 years on the sidelines. In Italy, 10 years to get through bankruptcy. And in the European Union, if you file bankruptcy, you can't vote for a year. So imagine being in a community where bankruptcy has this much shame associated with it. It inherently discourages entrepreneurship. It inherently discourages new enterprise creation, which we'll get to disruption, which I'll talk to you about in a minute. Our construct around bankruptcy, our construct around failure in our country is vitally important to how we as a society consider failure. Great entrepreneurs, all great entrepreneurs fail often. The really great ones fail, and they fail fast, and they learn from their failures. The ambassador mentioned Groupon. Groupon was not a success when we started the business. A year into the business, which was originally called The Point, it did not work. It did not work. There is a possibility when something doesn't work that you stop. That's a unique possibility, okay? Distinct possibility. It's not working, stop. Instead of stopping the business, we pivoted it, and it became Groupon. A year prior, we started a business called MediaBank. So MediaBank is in the business, well, here's the failure story. We started the business thinking that we could be a superior buyer and seller of media. Why? Because every page of a given magazine is sold for a different price. Therefore, there must be some inefficiency. What if we could create efficiency through understanding how to better understand all that information? We went all out, and 6 months into this business, we basically realized we were going up against an absolute dead end. And the reason was there were huge global companies who dominated the business of buying and selling media. So in 2008, one option then is to say we got it wrong and stop. But as I said, failure in the entrepreneurial journey is almost essential because you should expect it, and therefore when you see it, you should learn from it. It's not about failing and stopping, it's about failing and learning. And so we did learn, and what we saw when we faced these massive, massive competitors, and we said, you know what, rather than try to beat them, what if we could create a platform that would empower them to run their businesses better? What if instead of being a better buyer and seller of media, what if we created a platform to help media buyers and sellers run their businesses better? And so MediaBank literally changed 100%. We were totally wrong, and we thought we saw something that might be totally right. And we were right. And we saw through the failure, and we in fact created a business that's now called Media Ocean that is a dominant platform on which global media buying agencies around the entire world operate on. Failure is critical. Failure is not to be feared. Failure is to be expected, accepted, and then built on. The third concept is disruption. Sometimes I think that a better word for entrepreneur might be a disruptor, because that's what we do. We do it with a smile on our face because we're adding value by disrupting. We're adding unique value that those who might be in a better position to be disruptive might not be able to do it. And so entrepreneurs, when they start things from scratch, are really disrupting the status quo. That disruption starts in the life of an entrepreneur, the day-to-day life, which is basically walking around and asking a question, what could be better? What could go better? What could go better in terms of me getting a cab? What could go better in terms of me saving money? What could happen better in terms of me being a part of a media buying business? What could I do to make things better? By definition, what they're asking themselves is, how could I disrupt the world as I see it today? And what could I create? What could I hopefully uniquely conceive of and then execute that would perhaps change the way something works? We are a nation of disruptors as entrepreneurs. We were started that way. Part of the issue is that everything's aligned against disruption until you start to expose that possibility. That's part of the issue. The other part of the issue is that disruption as a concept, when embraced appropriately, creates entrepreneurial fireworks. It creates possibilities that are extraordinary. A great example of the power of disruption is the unique place in this country called Silicon Valley. What you have is 4 different constituencies that have come together basically trying to find opportunities to disrupt. You have universities who not only teach entrepreneurship, but actively seek to encourage those in all aspects of their schools to consider ways they can do things new, do things that are disruptive, that are innovative. So universities are one part of the community that's firing on all cylinders. The second one is venture capital. There's capital. There's capital seeking to fund new things that would disrupt the status quo. The third thing is big companies that are part of that valley ecosystem want disruption to be part of what they do and who they are. Cisco, HP, the new breed of more internet, social media companies. These companies are seeking out disruption. They are acquiring companies to disrupt themselves. Disruptors are what they're looking for in their employees, and that, I would venture to tell you, is a key part of the hiring process. How disruptive are you? And the fourth constituency is entrepreneurs, people who are out of school who are saying, what can I do? Who can I join to disrupt? So you've got big companies, you've got these small growing companies and entrepreneurs, you've got capital, and you've got universities. Those 4 entities work together beautifully around disruption. In other parts of our country, it's not so easy. Universities in the Midwest and in many other places in our country have a hard time even licensing the technology created within their walls. So here we are with research universities who are spending billions of dollars to create breakthrough technologies, but can't figure out how to get it out, how to get it in the commercial sphere. That's big problem number 1. Big problem number 2 is big companies in other parts of our country, specifically the Midwest, don't have an inclination. They're not leaning into disruption. They're not built to disrupt. The third is that venture capital has had a hard time getting here, okay? Good news is that it's here now. Bad news is it's had a hard time getting here, and as the facts on the flyer point out, it's not flowing as quickly and as fluidly as I would hope. And the fourth thing is that entrepreneurs have a hard time getting into those big companies, figuring out how to break through the walls and be disruptors, perhaps in collaboration. So I've had the good fortune of a couple things that have let me do something about it. One is I found myself, I'm a totally non-political person, but I found myself appointed to be the chairman of the Illinois Innovation Council. So we had this council that was created, and the council consisted of 4 types of people. You had the head of innovation from every university in Illinois. You had the head of government economic incentive and economic organizations from our government around that same table. You had venture capitalists at that table. And you had entrepreneurs at that same table. And so what do you do with a table that I think for perhaps the first time has people that are focused on innovation from government, from venture capital, from the academic part of our world, and from big companies. The head of innovation from our big companies like Cardinal Health and like Baxter. So what we did, which I'm not sure we could do without that group, is we said, what if we first brought in front of this group people who could present ideas to us, not for money, but for connections, for introductions, to ask us to help them get their job done. So we started with that, and we would have our meetings consist of people 5 minutes each to explain to us what they need in terms of introductions and connections. And I said, our job, what else can we do as an innovation council? Let's help these people innovate. Let's help them do what is so hard for them to do, which is get into the right doors. It worked wonderfully well, but there was more to be done. And the more was that big companies had a hard time, I thought, accessing and understanding the world of entrepreneurs, the world of Midwest-based new companies that might be able to solve their big problems. So we took the show on the road. And what we said is, why don't we ask big companies to create a new position at the highest level? That position will be called Chief Startup Officer. What we'll ask that position to do is to pick up the phone, which might sound easy for all of us, but in big company land, it's hard for an entrepreneur to make a phone call and get it answered, and understand who to talk to about their idea, about their company, about what they've been able to create. Now, if the answer is, thank you, let us consider it, and after consideration, there's not an opportunity, no sweat. I'm good with that. But what's really problematic is when you can't even get the phone answered. So with that call for a Chief Startup Officer position, we also said, what if we brought the demo day concept of many companies presenting things that might help you? What if we brought it to you? What if we created a demo day for Allstate, a demo day for Hyatt, a demo day for Baxter? And guess what the companies said? They said, let's go. And we've now done, I think, 11 of these. And our goal is to do a demo day with every large company in our state. And the outcomes, the quantifiable outcomes of businesses that have grown, that have progressed, that have had customer relationships and investment, what's happened is nothing short of extraordinary. And the pride that I have in this is that we're the only state that has ever done this. This is unique on the United States stage. So a culture of collaboration, a culture where disruption is invited, is tested, is one that will eventually create an entrepreneurial playground where people will be extraordinarily comfortable in talking about disruptive opportunities, and perhaps CEOs of very large companies will look at disruption in a welcome way, and will create cultures not of bureaucracy, but that encourage innovation and beg ideas that would throw things a little bit off kilter. I also believe that we're going to see, not far from now, situations where big companies become co-founders of entrepreneurial new companies. This is a new concept, but I am personally involved in an instance of this right now. It will happen because big companies understand that small organizations have an advantage of speed, an advantage of agility that is unique. And in partnership with a small group of entrepreneurs, that big company can help solve their problems and then commercialize those solutions in a big, big feeder. So I come back to entrepreneur as artist. My wife and I were in New York. Last year we saw a wonderful play called Red, by John Ellis, maybe. I'm forgetting the name. It was a play about Mark Rothko, and really extraordinary play because it was just two people on the stage the whole play. It was Mark Rothko and his studio assistant. And it really dug deep into the mind of Mark Rothko, the obsession it gives you. And in the midst of learning about Mark Rothko in color, you really saw the mind, the creative mind at work. And this young assistant was at his side through it all, helping prepare the canvas, cleaning the brushes, listening, a mentor and a young entrepreneur, an experienced business person and somebody new to the field, an iconic artist and his studio assistant. And so as the relationship develops, you understand the brilliance of Mark Rothko. The conclusion of the play was what was so powerful. The conclusion really came together when the studio assistant said, you know what, I'm done working for you. I'm tired of being treated the way you're treating me. And truly, I wanted to do this in the beginning. I want to be an artist. That's why I came to work for you. And it's time for me to go do my own thing and be an artist. And the last three words, I think, are what got me so powerfully. Mark Rothko looks at this young assistant, and he ends their relationship with three words: make something new. That's it. That's what an artist is doing. They're making something new, uniquely new to them. And on the canvas of capitalism, what an entrepreneur is doing is they're making something uniquely new. They're building on all of the colors and all of the canvases and all of the surfaces that have come before them. And they're finding out what things might go together that might appear disconnected, but their vision shows the connection. And they're seeing what might be. And they're saying to themselves, I have to make something new because I'm an artist. That's the entrepreneur's journey. Thank you.
Thanks, Brad. That was wonderful. Now we'd like to go out to the audience for questions. If you wouldn't mind, please, raising your arm and waiting for a mic and making sure your question is a question. We can start off with the McGowan Fellows if you want, over there. No? Okay, well then I'll kick it off. So Brad, what you mentioned about the tolerance for bankruptcy in Western Europe was pretty shocking, but probably not surprising. I'm thinking about emerging markets and the other 6.3 billion people in the world. Do you see any bright lights out there, and how are some of them? I'm sure it's not homogeneous, but have you worked in Brazil or with China or India, and how's their view of entrepreneurialism, and what do you see happening in those markets?
So Groupon has operations in, or had operations in China. We have operations in India, in many Latin American countries. Entrepreneurship is not only alive and well, but most importantly, the oxygen, the capital is finding its way all over the globe. Some of the great venture capital firms are opening up or have long had offices in China, and that's paying off in a big way. And as have the offices that are in India are starting to pay off in a big way. There's been an explosion of capital down in South America, and I think that the internet and the ubiquitous information world that we live in has exposed entrepreneurship to people through their phones, through whatever their consumption engine is of information. Entrepreneurship has been exposed around the world, which is fantastic. So I think on a global basis, we're in a better place than we've ever been.
Great news. Yes, next question from the audience. Right over there, please, in the fourth row from the back.
What do you think about Bitcoin and cryptocurrency as a big disruptive for...
Sorry, could you put the mic closer to your mouth, please? Sorry.
Hello? Okay.
Yes, great, thanks.
What do you think about Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies?
What was this? Bitcoin and what?
Cryptocurrencies? Cryptocurrency?
Oh, cryptocurrencies.
Yeah.
Well, so Bitcoin is mostly misunderstood by popular media. Forget the fact that it goes up and down, okay? Because I don't think any of us here are speculating on Bitcoin. But the importance of Bitcoin is an anonymous ledger where you can trade currency with no friction cost. So part of the problem of credit cards and money transfer is there's a machine built that has gotten in the way of me paying Neve. And so that machine takes a percentage of that transfer, and the problem in that transfer is that those 3% add up. Over time, your entire dollar has now been eaten by Visa or MasterCard. So the beauty of Bitcoin, conceptually, is I can give you 1 penny, and it costs nothing. So Bitcoin may or may not be the answer, the solution to that problem, but sooner than later, there will be a way that we can all trade money and therefore do business with each other and have zero friction cost. And when that happens, the opportunities that will become available are fantastic. For example, what would happen to the media business if we could pay by consumption? We could pay by every article that we read. We paid 1/100th of a penny per article that we read. It's a way that we could, in a much more affordable manner, give value to those that provide something to us, and perhaps enable them to have valuable businesses of providing, information discovery as reporters, and make a business of it. So that's just one example of so many that will open up when the cost of transferring money is zero.
Next question, please. Yeah, right there.